Octagon houses spark a certain fascination in American architectural history. With their 8-sided plans, wraparound verandas, and often domed roofs, they stand out in a landscape dominated by square and rectangular homes. Though they trace lineage back to ancient times, their heyday in the United States was surprisingly brief, spanning roughly from the mid-19th century to the turn of the 20th. A person today might find them curious, even whimsical, but behind their distinctive shape is a story of one persuasive promoter. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. While we could dwell on ancient and European precedents, it's enough to note that the octagon shape has surfaced in human structures for millennia. The Tower of the Winds in Athens, dating to somewhere between 100 and 50 BC, was built to measure time, and over 1,000 years later, during the 17th and 18th centuries, Dutch colonists in New York and New Jersey recalled octagonal church designs common in Holland, constructing a handful of 8-sided religious buildings based on traditions from their homeland. Meanwhile, Thomas Jefferson gave this shape a subtle nod when he designed Poplar Forest, an octagonal retreat house in Lynchburg, Virginia, beginning in 1806. These examples foreshadowed, in small ways, the surge of interest that would grip America a few decades later. The person most responsible for popularizing octagon houses was Orson Squire Fowler. Though not a professional architect, he was actually a phrenologist, a now discredited pseudoscience linking skull shape to personality. Regardless of how bad his research was, Fowler was confident and charismatic, having a flair for public speaking and marketing. In 1848, he published the octagonal mode, followed by an expanded version titled The Octagon House, a home for all, a new, cheap, convenient, and superior mode of building. The book was part technical manual, part inspiration, championing an 8-sided plan as more efficient, healthier, and even easier to build than conventional boxy homes. Fowler's basic claim went like this: if you circle a stake with a string and mark a round foundation, you can then square it off twice to yield 8 straight sides, effectively mimicking a circle. He believed that an octagonal house offered more interior space for the same perimeter length and allowed for better ventilation and sunlight. He was also enthusiastic about gravel wall or concrete construction, though in practice, many octagon houses were built with wood or brick. According to his beliefs, a central stair hall could be bypassed entirely in favor of exterior verandas that allowed movement between rooms, a notion that worked better in warm climates than in cold ones, which forced people to go outside to get from room to room. Victorian-era builders of the 1850s and 1860s were already used to creating angled bays and 135-degree corners in their more traditional houses, so transitioning to an 8-sided plan wasn't a giant leap. Fowler insisted that octagonal walls would capture more natural light and regulate temperatures better. However, real-world execution had its quirks. The shape forced some rooms into odd triangular corners, and building a proper staircase proved tricky, especially if the owner wanted an open central space or planned to use the wraparound porch to get from one upstairs room to another. Enthusiasm ran high from about 1850 to 1870, particularly in New York's Hudson River Valley, where Fowler lived, as well as New England, the Midwest, and into parts of Canada. Thousands of octagon houses sprang up, some more modest, others extremely lavish. By the 1870s, this eccentric style had begun to wane, overshadowed by more conventional Victorian plans and taste. Nevertheless, let's take an in-depth look at some examples. Before Fowler came along, Thomas Jefferson had taken a keen interest in geometric house plans. Poplar Forest, which he began building in 1806, is sometimes called the earliest American example of an 8-sided residence. He used the estate as a private retreat, meticulously planning each angle and facade. Poplar Forest didn't directly inspire the 1850s fad. Fowler himself was apparently unaware of its existence when he wrote his books, but Jefferson's design stands as a distinguished precursor. Today, Poplar Forest is a National Historic Landmark open for tours, with ongoing restoration efforts to help return it to Jefferson's original vision. Next, we'll head down to Natchez, Mississippi. Longwood, also known as Nutt's Folly, remains the largest octagonal mansion in the United States. Designed in 1859 by architect Samuel Sloan for cotton planter Holler Nutt, it is a stunningly ambitious structure with a Byzantine-style dome on top. The Civil War halted construction in 1861, leaving the upper floors unfinished. Only the basement and first floor were ever fully completed, making for a dramatic contrast between the grand, ornate ground level and the bare bones above. Today, Longwood operates as a house museum, preserving its surreal mix of completed and unfinished spaces. Traveling back north, we'll make a stop in Irvington, New York. Perched atop a hill overlooking the Hudson River, the Armour Steiner House might be the most visually spectacular of all Octagon houses. Built around 1860 and later expanded in the 1870s by tea importer Joseph Steiner, it features a dome reminiscent of a classical temple, complete with elaborate Victorian-era detailing. It's believed to be the only fully domed octagonal residence still standing. Once owned by writer Carl Karmer and briefly by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, it is now a private residence, meticulously restored. Variations on the basic design wielded wildly different results. Down in Abeville, South Carolina, built between 1852 and 1856, the Fraser Presley House stands apart for its unique layout combining 3 octagonal components connected by a central hallway. This stuccoed brick house sports 4 3-story columns and originally had a widow's walk on the central octagon. Legends hold that its plan may be the only one like it in the country, proof that Fowler's writing sparked plenty of individual interpretations. Passed down through generations of the same family, it remains a captivating relic of the octagon craze. All across the Northeast and Midwest, pockets of octagon houses linger in older neighborhoods. In San Francisco, the McElroy Octagon House, also known as the Colonial Dames Octagon House, now operates as a museum. In Washington, D.C., there's the Octagon House, built by William Thornton. Ironically, it isn't a true octagon, but it earned its nickname thanks to its somewhat angled design. In smaller towns across the country, you may stumble on these 8-sided curiosities, often lovingly preserved or adapted as private residences, bed and breakfast, or museums. But the rarity of such surviving structures raises the question, why didn't octagon houses become a lasting mainstream style? In Fowler's eyes, they were superior in every way, cheaper, more spacious, and healthier, but building them correctly took more careful measuring and stronger carpentry skills, especially if one wanted to avoid awkward rooms or complicated roof lines. The geometry was easy to imagine, but complex to implement. Furnishing wedge-shaped rooms also proved challenging, and the wraparound porches demanded frequent upkeep. Additionally, the octagon was simply a novelty that clashed with changing taste. As Victorian styles evolved, more traditionally rectangular and ornate designs sporting gables, turrets, and elaborate trim became the norm for those with means. Fowler's advocacy for gravel wall construction also contributed to practical difficulties. Contemporary builders were not fully convinced by this untested approach. Many owners chose conventional wood frames or brick. Some tried Fowler's methods, only to encounter cracking or structural issues, especially in climates prone to freezing. The physical realities of building often clashed with Fowler's more starry-eyed claims. By the late 19th century, the style was widely seen as an eccentric fad, just like Fowler's other passion, phrenology. Nevertheless, some owners treasure their quirky homes, enough to keep them well-maintained over generations. Today, standing octagon houses often exude an air of romance, part architectural curiosity, and part historical artifact. Enthusiasts will drive miles out of their way to see a carefully preserved example, marveling at its geometry and the sheer audacity of someone deciding to build an 8-sided residence in the 1850s. They're also a reminder of a lively period in American design when creative homeowners were willing to buck convention in search of more efficient or eye-catching forms. Much like other once-forgotten styles, octagon houses have returned to public awareness through preservation movements, tourism, and media spotlights. From Longwood's famously unfinished upper floors to the Armour Steiner House's storybook dome, these structures remain evidence of the fearless creativity in an era that otherwise prized ornamentation. Wherever you find them, octagon houses invite us to wonder what might have happened if Fowler's vision had swept the nation more permanently. How would modern subdivisions look if the quote-unquote circle approximated by 8 sides had caught on for good? Would we all enjoy better sunlight, cross breezes, and geometry in our day-to-day lives? Or would we just be cursing the corners every time we tried to fit a sofa into the living room? Sometimes, as history shows, a domestic vision is perfectly viable and stands the test of time. At other times, it becomes a historical curiosity, beautiful, occasionally perplexing, but undeniably worth saving for future generations to admire and enjoy. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. What are your thoughts on octagon houses? Do you think Fowler was onto something, or are you glad these designs stayed in the past? Let me know down below in the comments section. And while you're there, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of This House.